All right, for today's video review, we're going to be taking a look at Transformers Generations Legacy Evolution Leader Class Prime Universe Skyquake. Yeah, this has been a figure that I've been excited about for quite a while now, ever since we first saw images of it. This is the first figure that I feel like really strikes the perfect balance of these like sort of, new reinventions of sort of G1-ified Transformers Prime characters, because, when Legacy started, we got Bulkhead and RC, and they kind of just felt like watered down versions of their original characters, and I think that Hasbro really listened to the sort of like fan backlash against those figures and decided to kind of like tweak their approach to it to make these characters, still fit in with the other generations in G1 figures, but give them a bit more of their identity from their sort of like original designs from Transformers Prime. Because like, even with Knockout, it was a bit better, but it was still just kind of like it was a Studio Series Jazz remold. So it kind of felt like it was lacking a few of those sort of signature Knockout design flares. And yeah, when we first saw images of this mold, I think that this is the first one that really strikes that good balance. I mean, we also saw Prowl, but that's a G1ification of animated. This is the first Prime character where I feel like they've really gotten it right on the mark. And they've decided to do something kind of interesting here because, like, sort of serendipitously, just because this character in Transformers Prime was named Skyquake, and like really he wasn't even the more sort of like prominent character to use this body type. That was really Dreadwing, who showed up later, who was his brother when Skyquake was really only kind of like a single episode character. He kind of just showed up and died. But because this character's name is Skyquake, they've made the kind of interesting decision to sort of like blend his Transformers Prime design with the like Euro G1 Skyquake design, who is one of the Predators, which is a really cool sort of idea here, and I think that it works pretty well. And I'm guessing that eventually, maybe in Generation Selects, we're going to get a repaint of this mold into just like a straight up and down, Skyquake from G1, just because, the color scheme was very different. I don't think this feels a lot more like the Prime character, even though it does have some design cues that it shares with G1 Skyquake. I would like to see like a proper colored Euro G1 Skyquake. I think that would be really cool. And I do think that they're going to do that because of, one of the gimmicks with this guy and how it's advertised, which I'll get into. But yeah, he looks pretty nice in his jet mode here. It's got some of the cues from G1 Skyquake, like these, big vents or whatever, and like some of the stuff going on in the back here with like the like extra, translucent piece. But it also, it does feel quite a bit like Skyquake and Dreadwing's jet from the show. Even has that, that sort of thing where in the show it kind of felt like their legs were kind of just like balled up and tucked under there when you like looked at the undercarriage of the jet on the CG model. And it has like the, the three thrusters, and I think it works pretty well as a blend between the two of them, and has like the sort of like shoulder pad shape here in the front. I think it works pretty well. It does have landing gear, which can obviously retract if you want to, just swoosh around your jet, and that works pretty well. Just 3 pieces of landing gear here. It also kind of, for transformation, but kind of not, also has an opening cockpit, which is cool. And there are little sculpted seats on the inside, it's got 2 seats there, even though I think the jet in the show, it was a single pilot jet, but whatever. But yeah, no, pretty nice jet mode. It comes with a couple weapons here. His big sort of like, underslung, I don't know the proper minigun, I guess. Gatling gun. I don't know guns very well, but he's got that. So I'm hoping that they have, a different mold for this, because, in the show, Dreadwing's gun was shaped slightly differently. So I'm hoping that they have like an alternate front section on the mold somewhere. And then he also comes with his sword, which is done in the translucent plastic. And if you want to store these, what you can do with the sword is you actually fold it up like this, and then it stores inside the underside of the gun here. You just kind of want to press it into this section. Or is it like that? No, it's like that. Yeah, you want it so the kind of like curved section fits in with this little like, groove here. And that allows it to actually compress a lot more cleanly underneath the gun. And then this can just store straight up underneath, you just peg it in like this. I will say it does take a little bit of fiddling because the peg is so far back. If you like press it in too much, then it kind of wants to like pry the up end of the gun, you know, downward, which means that the landing gear doesn't quite touch. So it is kind of a process to get it plugged in just the correct amount. So it's, you know, plugged in properly so it can sit flush, but then also not, you know, messing with the front landing gear like there it kind of is. I find that one thing that kind of helps is if you just bring down the back landing gear a little bit, that helps get all 3 landing gear on the ground and actually have it sit under there. But that's really nice. I like that the weapon storage is there. You know, I think the jet is a little bit cleaner without it, but still, it definitely feels like actually complete weapon storage, whereas I think it would have looked kind of silly just pegged onto the top, and it kind of feels like it serves some function too, right? Like if it's flying around, you can actually like shoot at people on the ground. It kind of makes actual sense, and I really appreciate that. But yeah, pretty nice vehicle mode overall in terms of comparisons. Just for the standard one, for what it's worth, here he is with Kingdom Sideswipe. Obviously, you know, we're not really going to get proper scale between jets and cars in the Transformers line, because the jets would have to be all humongous figures. Like they'd have to all at least be commander classes to actually scale with the cars. So, you know, there's some compromise there, but that's what they look like together. For a standard size jet comparison, here he is with Earthrise Starscream, or just the Seeker mold in general. So you can see they're pretty comparable size, even though he's a leader class and he's a Voyager. He definitely has more bulk to him, but, you know, he compresses a lot more. So he's pretty comparable size to Starscream there. And then for another more recent jet who is more relevant to this figure than it might initially seem, here he is with Legacy Needlenose. And yeah, there's some kind of interesting stuff going on here, because they even advertise this on the box, and I'm kind of surprised that they did that, because, you know, it's like, oh, here, we're going to advertise the functionality between the Transformers Prime Skyquake and G1 Needlenose. All right, I mean, we all know what's going on here. This is just like a, you know, preempt to what these molds are eventually going to be used for, because, you know, if you're unfamiliar with the Predators toy line, of which G1 Skyquake was a part of, the other smaller Predators had this function where they could like plug onto the top, and there was some weird thing with like a scope that you could look through, and I don't think that they're going to do that, but clearly they're going to be using the Needlenose mold to make these smaller Predators, and they're going to be using the Skyquake mold to be, you know, the other Skyquake. So if you look here on Needlenose's chest, he's got these like slots here, and then there are these 2 tabs on the top section of Skyquake, so you can just kind of match them up and peg them in together. It can be kind of tricky sometimes, honestly. Doesn't feel like it should be, since it's just a simple peg and slot connection, but does it have to be the farther back ones? I don't think so. I have done this, so I know that it works. Okay, there we go. It just takes a little bit of extra force. So you can do that for whatever it's worth. Again, you know, this is kind of replicating the G1 Predator gimmick, so I don't know what business Skyquake and Needlenose have with each other to be doing this, but I guess, you know, they figured, well, the functionality is there, so might as well show it off, you know, for that classic scene in any Transformers continuity where in Transformers Prime, the one episode character Skyquake interfaces with G1 Needlenose. Obviously, you know, that hit reference that we're all aware of. So you can do it, but, you know, obviously this is more meant for what these figures are going to be turned into, but still cool to see that functionality so far. Again, you know, it doesn't do anything with like scopes or anything like that. It's pretty much just a jet sitting on a jet, but you know, you can do it. It's a piece of functionality on the figure, so worth showing off. But yeah, to get into transformation, obviously we'll just take the weapons off for now. First thing you want to do, I guess we'll put away the landing gear. Then you want to take the wings, and they untab from the legs here, so you just want to fold them up like that, so that you can take the legs, and they kind of they unfold at the knee and then also rotate down and then rotate around, so they're actually sitting properly forward like that. It's not too hard when you're going from vehicle mode to robot mode, but it can be kind of tricky to get like the right orientation of you know, of the joints when you're going into jet mode. So you just rotate them down like that, and then you want to take the part of the tail fins here, and they just tabbed into the side of the leg. So you rotate them up like this, and there's a little slot on the fin that just interlocks with this. It's also on a hinge, so you can rotate it around and then just tab it in to fill in the back of the leg, which is pretty cool. And then just unfold the little toes there and leave these up like that for now. Then you want to take these pieces. Maybe this is the best time, honestly, to adjust the camera because we're going to be getting pretty tall here. All right, then you want to take these sections, which are going to be the shoulder pads, and kind of untab them from the section here. They're just on a little double hinge armature and swivel thing there. So you just want to bring them out like this for now, just so you can make room for the arms, which you just fold out of the body. Now, they've got some kind of weird ratchets. So when you're going back into jet mode, like for some reason, the ratchets are a lot easier to like fold out than they are to fold back in. So it takes like a lot more force to fold it back in, but I'll talk about that in robot mode. But yeah, you just want to fold them out to the side here and then untab them from each other and rotate them out to the side and just leave it like that for now. Then you want to take the entire waist section here and kind of fold it down like this and actually fold it only 90 degrees, which is only honestly just meant for like clearance to get these sections around to the other side. It folds back to exactly the way it was for robot mode, but you have to do that for clearance sake. And then you take this entire top section here and it'll just split down the middle like this. And you want to rotate these sections just so they've got some clearance here to go around the legs. And then with each of these, you want to rotate these around to the other side just like this. And then you can rotate the waist and then compress this section down a little bit. And just leave them floating like this for now, because you want to take the whole cockpit section and it will untab from the main body here. And then reveal the head, and then you want to take the shoulder pads and then rotate them up out of the way so this can fold down properly, and then take the actual nose cone and then fold it up like this, which kind of like it kind of does this weird thing with the cockpit where it makes it like sit a little bit further. And then, okay, big asterisk, you do have to make some edits to the figure for this to totally work properly. What you're supposed to do is then bring this down and then take the nose cone of the cockpit, which is this is where it ends up, and it actually ends up slotting into this waist section here. So I find it's better to just slide it in like that, and then compress this up. Now, so here's the thing. With this figure, there's a bit of a design oversight, and this actually by default can't really fold up properly the way it's supposed to, because when the landing gear folds into the nose, there's a little section that it's supposed to be able to slide past, which by default it can't really do. So that results in the thing kind of sitting like up like this, which honestly is not that big of a problem. It still functions more or less fine. It just means the backpack doesn't quite sit exactly how it's originally designed to. Now, I did see a video on how to fix this, and it involves basically, here, if I can just showing this off, basically what you want to do is just take apart these screws and then split this whole section. There's a little glue seal right here, which you'll have to break. And then basically just like re-glue when you're putting it back together. And then there's like a little section there that you want to just like carve a little bit off with an X-Acto knife, and that works totally fine. I'll link the video of the person whose video I saw on how to do this, because, you know, he explains it a lot more in depth, and I'm not going to bother, you know, I would take it apart again to show you if it didn't involve, you know, breaking and re-gluing that glue seal for a second time, but I'll put the description, or I'll put the link to that video in the comments so you can see, and I'll put it in the description as well. But yeah, it's not a very difficult thing to do once you know what to do. Basically, this is how it would sit by default, and then you'd have these tabs on these armature sections here, which are supposed to sit in this, but then obviously they don't really line up because, you know, these are now forced to sit at an angle, and basically it all functions more or less the same. Like it's kind of just a matter of like the backpack sits a little bit more flush when it's actually, you know, working properly, but you don't necessarily need to make this edit at all for the figure to function. It more or less still works just fine. It's just kind of a case where like you sort of know that something is like not quite working right. So like for me, it was like bugging me a whole lot, and I'm like, I need that to sit properly, but it wasn't causing any actual like major issues with the figure. So basically, once you make that fix, then you can actually compress the cockpit up so that this all sits sort of like, you know, parallel and level how it's supposed to, but you know, it's not strictly speaking totally necessary. But yeah, you bring these sections around, and then these bits on the backpack here, you want to kind of like fold down this this tail fin, and then so you can rotate it around like that, which can be a little bit tricky to do sometimes just in terms of clearance, but it's not too bad. It just kind of bumps into stuff. And then you can bring this back together and then re-lock it together like that to sit on the backpack. Again, that still totally functions. Even when the backpack sits a little out, it's just like a little bit less clearance because you can see there is some space in there for that to actually work. And then, you know, in theory, then these kind of lock into the nose cone section. They honestly, even when you fix it, still kind of don't. They kind of just hover over it, but at least it lines up, so whatever. And then you can rotate the waist so it's, you know, facing forward again. And then for the arms here, they just unfold, they double hinge down at the elbow like that, and then you fold out the hands, and then it has this little panel which actually locks the hand in place and covers up that arm gap, which I really appreciate. So you just fold that around and just tab that into place just like that. And do the same thing on the other side here. And then bring the arms down, which again, kind of tricky to do with these ratchets. I don't really like the way those ratchets feel. And then you kind of just want to bring the shoulder pads on their little armatures. They kind of just like sit down above the shoulders. They don't lock in or anything. And there is a little slider that the head is on, and it has to sit back like this for vehicle mode. So I assume, even though it's not really listed in the instructions either, I assume that you're supposed to slide it forward for robot mode. But honestly, I think it's just better slid back in both modes because then his head actually fits like more in line with where his arms are. So I usually leave it slid back. But yeah, there we have Skyquake in his robot mode, and I think he looks really good. Now, the hips here, they kind of have this weird thing going on where when you bring them forward, they're sitting just like a little bit forward from, you know, like straight up and down with the body. But when you bring them back, they're sitting a little bit back with the way they are up and down with the body. Like you can't actually get it totally in line. So what I usually do is, because he's got a backpack here and not great heel support, I usually bring him a click forward and then just like adjust him at the knees a little bit so he's actually standing up straight. And I think that that's the most stable way to do it. But, you know, you kind of mess around with that. Likewise, you may have noticed that, like, you know, he doesn't have that, you know, that annoying like ratchet thing with the hips that they were doing for a while, where it was either like straight up and down stock or like splayed out to the side and you couldn't get an in between. But weirdly, you can't actually get them straight up and down. It's either like this with that slight A stance, or the legs actually point in. So it doesn't matter, because this is pretty much, you know, the amount of splayed that I'd want his legs to be, unless he's doing some like crazy action pose. But it is a little weird to me that he can't actually stand straight, you know, like straight stock up and down, you know, straight legs. But whatever, it's not really that big a deal. But yeah, no, I think he looks really good in terms of articulation. The head is on a ball joint. Like I said, it can also slide forward for whatever that's worth, but so it can rotate around, and he can look up a pretty decent amount, which is nice. The shoulders here, obviously, you can kind of move the shoulder pads out of the way to adjust. It's got like a swivel right here, a hinge right here, and then the hinge is connected to a ball joint. So they're pretty good at getting out of the way. And this is another thing, that if you don't have that backpack, like, you know, if you haven't done the fix and the backpack sits a little bit further back, then the shoulder pads are a little bit more of a pain to deal with, but they still mostly sit fine in place. But the shoulders themselves, they're on a swivel right here. They're on that ratchet out to the side, which feels like, I don't know, man. It feels kind of like squeaky and gross when you bring it out to the side, and then too strong when you bring it back in. It's like, I don't know. It's not a great feeling joint. It's a little bit scary to mess with. Also, in addition to that, the arms don't really like tab into place here when you actually like line it all up. So this joint could have been tighter, because then when you're like trying to mess with the arm, it's like easy to kind of just like move around that joint. And then sometimes if you push that joint too far in, then it kind of just like compresses into the body, which again, if you haven't done that nose cone fix, then the nose cone sits so far back that it always can compress into the body. So that's another thing that helps with. But I don't like the way that joint feels in particular. He also has a bicep swivel, which again is much tighter than this like butterfly joint that he has. So it's kind of annoying. You have to like grab the shoulder itself to actually use it. And then he's got a double jointed elbow for transformation. So he gets a pretty deep curl there. The wrists are on swivels, which is nice. He's got a waist cut. The way that it ends up sitting, the cuts on a bit of an angle, so it does have like a bit of a weird rotation to it, but it still works just fine. The hips here, like I said, can go forward and back and out to the side. These are much nicer ratchets, which feel strong but are easy to move. But like I said, they have that weird thing where they can't actually be straight, but whatever. He's got a thigh swivel. He's got a double jointed knee, which despite the sort of like bulky and chunky nature of his legs works really, really well. Like you can actually get him like pretty much a full knee curl here, which is really, really nice. And it actually like looks natural and good too, which I think is really impressive. So you can get him in some fun poses just due to that alone. And then his feet, the feet can tilt back for a transformation. They can't tilt up anymore, but they do have a separate ankle tilt, which only goes about that far. So, pretty decent articulation with this guy, all things considered. Really, my main gripe here is just the way that the shoulder joints feel. Their range of motion is fine. It's just the way that they feel is a little bit, I don't know, not ideal, but still pretty good posing potential here. And then the wings, you can also kind of fold back if you want. And then for whatever reason, even though they don't transform at all, like these are also on hinges. I'm not sure what that's for, but I guess, to stay true to the original like Euro G1 Skyquake, he really didn't have like wings sticking out to the side, I don't think. So maybe it would be more accurate for him to fold these back, but for Skyquake, it is more accurate to have the wings pointed up like this, even though in the show, both Skyquake and Dreadwing had their wings pointed down in robot mode. That's okay. I think it's fine that they've made that change. And, speaking of the comparisons between him and G1 Skyquake, the head sculpt is very, very much the Transformers Prime Skyquake design, and I think it looks really, really nice. But they've decided here to go with the chest design, really more of the Euro G1 Skyquake, because I've unlocked his waist here. Whoops. Because in Transformers Prime, they had the cockpit of the jet as their chest. So they've kind of decided to go more G1 for that. And, I think that's fine. I think it works pretty well. Like I said, in robot mode, you definitely feel the sort of like blend between the two different designs a lot more. But yeah, no, I think it works pretty well. Now, in terms of his weapons here, obviously we can have him take the sword out of the gun. Now, there's something kind of weird about the sword where you can fold it out, and I think it looks pretty good, but it has sculpting on it, which kind of makes it look like it was once like a spring-loaded missile or something like that. So maybe they're going to do something else for like Generation Selects in terms with the G1 sort of colored Skyquake and make this some kind of like missile or something. I don't know, but I can't really figure out why else it would have that, because it looks like the little lock for where you'd plug in a spring-loaded missile, or like this would be the missile, which is kind of interesting. And as a result of that, it means that he can't really hold it in his right hand, because like, this kind of goes all the way up the handle here. So that actually like runs into the hand. Whereas on the left hand, there's the little gap in the fingers there. So you can actually, put it in his hand properly. So he could only hold it upside down in his right hand. But still, I think the sword looks pretty good. And because that has actually no functionality for this particular figure, if you wanted to, you could take like an X-Acto knife and like shave those sections off if you really needed him to be able to hold it in his right hand as well. But it doesn't really bother me all that much. And then with the Gatling gun here, it doesn't like rotate or anything. He's got a couple handhold options here. He's got this handle, which you could have him hold incorrectly, like, like this. That's an option. Or you could have him hold it underslung like this, or plug it into his arm, which is because he has a peg hole on the underside of his arm here. I think maybe you could also, no, you can't really use the screw hole, but you can use the peg here, so you can have it like that. But additionally, he also has this neat little flip out handle, which is actually itself on a ball joint. So you can use some like sort of two-handed poses, or what you can do is just, just underslung it under his arm, just one-handed that way. I kind of prefer that look, but if you want to do the two-handed look, you could also do that. If you want, you can either plug in this under his arm or just like plug it into the other side of this hand, which I think is more what you're supposed to do. And then because this is on a ball joint, because he has that sort of extra butterfly joint there, it's actually easier to get this in his hand first since that's the one that moves around. But you can get him actually holding this two-handed, and I think that more or less looks pretty good. Like, it's kind of hard to get him into good-looking poses where he's actually like aiming and firing it, but if he's just like candidly standing there with the gun at the ready, I think that looks pretty good. So that's a pretty nice versatility there with the weapon. You can do a few different fun things with it. Then in terms of storage, I don't like this storage option as well as the vehicle mode storage, but it does mostly function. Basically, the only place really to store it is he has these holes on the back of the wings here, so you can plug it in just straight up and down like that, and that looks a little bit ugly from the front. What I tend to do is I like angle it so it kind of sits slung on his back like that. Granted, that means that you can't really like bring the wings any further back. They kind of have to stay sort of like stock straight, but that doesn't really bother me. So that's usually how I tend to store it. But, you know, you've got a couple options there. The other thing I will say about him is that he really could have used a bit more heel support. Given how little the heels actually are, he does, and how big his backpack is, even when you don't have that fix, he does stand up better than you'd expect him to, but he is not too difficult to knock over. Oops, I'm knocking over my background here too. So, you know, that could have been better, but honestly is not too big of an issue. He mostly stands just fine if you have, you know, the center of balance kind of adjusted accordingly. But yeah, in terms of comparisons in this mode, just for the standard one, here he is with Kingdom Sideswipe. Just so you can see, it's pretty big leader. He's not one of the, you know, he's bigger than like Blitzwing, for example, but he's not quite on the size scale of like the Dinobots. So, you know, he's bigger than some of our, you know, more recent leaders, but he's not like enormous like old leaders or anything like that. But yeah, that's what he looks like with them. Here he is again with Starscream, just for that, you know, Seeker mold comparison. Just for posterity's sake, here he is with Needle Nose, even though, you know, they have even less to do with each other in this mode than they did in the other mode, since the actual interaction is in jet mode, but that's what they look like together. And then just for a other recent Transformers Prime comparison, here he is with Legacy Knockout, just so you can see what they look like together. Even though Knockout, I don't think, ever interacted with Skyquake in the show. He only interacted with Dreadwing, but yeah, I feel like scale-wise that more or less works for what Knockout and Dreadwing look like next to each other. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to him. It's a kind of a mixed bag of a figure. I think it looks really good in both modes. I think that a lot of the articulation and joints feel pretty good. He's just got a couple joints that don't feel super great, like the shoulders here. Both I wish that the like butterfly joint actually locked in place or had the option to, and I wish that there's just something was better about these, you know, shoulder ratchets, which don't feel good. But otherwise, that's pretty much it. I mean, there's the sort of big asterisk of like having to do this like fix where you have to take apart the section. But honestly, it's more just like a thing where it's like, oh, it'll bother you because you can just intuitively feel that something is not quite working how it's supposed to. But it mostly functioned just fine, even without making that fix. It just meant that the cockpit in here sat at a bit more of an angle and sat further back. And that, you know, made the shoulder pads a little bit more of a pain to deal with. But honestly, it was not really that big a deal. It does feel, I do enjoy the figure a lot more having done that fix. And it was a really easy fix to make, but it's not, strictly speaking, like super necessary. So I think it's fine. But yeah, no, I think that they really hit the right balance here of, you know, like Transformers Prime accuracy, but then also making it feel like it fit in with other G1 figures. And I think that the idea of blending him with G1 Skyquake was a really neat idea. And honestly means that, like, I assume that I'm going to be getting 3 of this mold for him and Dreadwing and then G1 Skyquake. And he's probably going to be my least favorite, just because out of the 3 color schemes, I like his the least. But, you know, I guess that's probably why they did it. The least significant of the characters is the one that they do first, so that they can get it out of the way. But, you know, the original, like, Transformers Prime Skyquake was famously quite difficult to get your hands on. So it's a great new opportunity to get a version of that character if you wanted one. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to him. If you enjoy my videos, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing. I do reviews every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. I've got an Instagram account where I post kind of toy-related stuff. That is toys.n.art on Instagram. And without further ado, here we have Transformers Generations Legacy Evolution Prime Universe Skyquake. Isn't that cool? You can do that. Good leg articulation.